All right, let's jump into it. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today for Elcom's webinar, 6 Inefficient Business Processes with Online Forms and Workflow Automation. Really excited to have everyone today and really appreciate you joining us. We really hope that today's webinar will be something you find really insightful, useful, and hopefully it's going to give you some practical tips on how to improve your organization's efficiency. We think this is especially timely given everything that's going on in the world right now, with a lot of people and teams no longer able to pass around physical paper or work in the same office. So we hope today you'll actually be able to learn something really practical, really useful, and it'll actually help you along your journey of automating manual paper-based business processes and digitizing those and bringing them online. My name is Josh Anstey. I'm the Customer Solutions Director at Elcom, and I'll be running today's webinar. I've been really lucky to work with organizations across all industries, delivering solutions that help digitize and automate their business through online forms and workflow solutions, as well as intranet and digital workplaces that their staff actually enjoy using. So going to be bringing some of that experience into the webinar today and talking about how other people have achieved similar challenges and some of those that you might be dealing with right now. And hopefully we'll be able to share a few great tips and tricks and ideas to make life a lot easier. We have a jam-packed agenda with some really exciting content to cover and share. So we'll start off with some of the key challenges businesses have with manual and inefficient processes, and maybe some of those will resonate with you and be challenges that you're grappling with right now, which is possibly why you've joined us today. We'll then look at the key considerations when automating and digitizing those manual and paper-based processes and think through what are the best ways to do that, how do we solve that problem, what are things you need to think about before you jump straight into it. I'm then actually going to jump into a demo of the Elcom Forms and Workflow solution. And so I'll jump in and give you a live demo. And I want to show you how easy it is to set up a forms and workflow process in a live environment. And then we'll wrap it up with where to next. So some quick wins to start automating manual processes and increasing efficiency. And really, we'd love you to move from the webinar today and actually have some great ideas of what you can implement, some great tips to give you quick wins in your organization, and obviously see how we might be able to help you and assist you. So to start, we've got a poll. So I'm going to be launching a poll onto the screen right now. And you should hopefully see that poll that's displaying. So the question is, where are you on the journey of online forms and workflow automation? So please jump in there and vote on the poll. And there's 4 different options. All right, let's close that poll. And let's share the results. Very interesting results we've got over here. I'm going to share those results on the screen, and hopefully everyone can see those. So really interesting. So when we look at the options over there, we currently have a solution in place that we are happy with. Doesn't look like anyone's happy with their current solution, so it's interesting. 67% said we currently have a solution in place, but are not happy with it and looking for an alternative option. So that's quite interesting. 33% we do not have a solution in place, which is actually quite interesting as well, that there isn't anything in place at the moment. And then 0% haven't even thought about it. So good that I guess 2/3 of the organization are somewhere along this journey, but obviously not happy with what they're doing. And I guess that's part of the reason why you might have joined us today, to see how you can improve it and do it a lot better. And 1/3 of the audience today don't even have something in place, but you're obviously exploring solutions and options and thinking about it as well. So yeah, really interesting to see those results. So thank you very much, everyone, for jumping in and answering that poll. So let's jump into it. Let's have a look at those key challenges that organizations are most likely grappling with, and possibly some of the things you're grappling with today. So the first is delays with handling paper forms. So we all know what that's like when there's a lot of paper in the organization, and it's something that physically needs to get signed, and then you hand it over to someone else, and you can't track where it is, and you don't know whether they've looked at it or reviewed it or approved it or signed it or rejected it. So there's just a lot of unknowns in that scenario, and there's just a lot of actual paper to be dealing with, which is another real big issue. I think also in today's environment, with so many people working remotely, this is going to become a bigger problem for organizations that haven't actually looked to digitize it yet or haven't done it in a really easy way, given everyone's going to be remote and not necessarily sitting next to each other. One of the other big challenges is around repetitive and manual tasks. So one of the challenges without thinking through how we can automate this and how to make it a lot easier is that you tend to do the same thing over and over. So maybe a manual task and it's very time consuming and you just keep having to repeat the same task, which is a bit boring, not very exciting. But also because you keep repeating the same task in a manual way, it raises the probability that there's going to be errors or mistakes or things that actually get missed. The other one is confusions over approvals. And that's a really interesting one because if something is manual, whether it's paper, whether it's lots of emails, whether it's a person going to talk to someone else, and there's no documented and structured approval process, often there can be this scenario where there is confusion over approvals and who should you go to get something approved or what are the next steps in the approval process, because it's not well documented. It's not visual, you can't access it. And so you just pass on to the next person, hoping it's the right person to review or approve something. Missing documents and data is another huge thing. So if it is manual, whether again that's paper or lots of emails or lots of phone calls, for example, you end up with missing documents and data, and there's no way to audit it, there's no way to track it or search it or find that information. And so what happens is it goes through a process, especially if something has many steps in the review process or the approval process. You'll find it'll go through that whole process and it gets to the end and suddenly you're backtracking because a few documents have been lost along the way or it doesn't have all the data or information it needs. Again, one of those big challenges is too many emails. So as it is, everyone gets enough emails. Having emails flying between people to review something and approve something and get the okay to jump to the next step and get the next approval. Firstly, just clogs up everyone's inboxes. But secondly, you can't track it. You can't audit it. You can't look back and actually see what was the journey it went on, who reviewed it, when did they approve it, were there any comments, and it just gets completely lost. So for industries where audit trails are really important, especially in the industries of healthcare and not-for-profit and professional services like legal and accounting and education and government and look, financial services, really every industry, but there are some industries that are stricter with their auditing around reviews and approvals. The idea that it's all seen in email is obviously a really, really big problem when you're trying to review and approve information. The other problem with it being manual based, whether it's emails up and down or whether it's actually paper documents, is you'll often have incorrect data or there's actually no data validation, meaning someone could put a field that's supposed to have 10 numbers in, they might put 12 numbers in, or it's supposed to be an email address, but it wasn't a valid email address, or it was supposed to be an address and they put the wrong data in there. So there's no validation to make sure that you're getting the right information in the right fields. The other big challenge is the incorrect form is used. So if these aren't in a nice, easy to access digital portal experience for users, often what happens is you just go use that form, whether it's a Word document or a PDF or a piece of paper, and also you're just using the most recent one you used last time, as opposed to going to a central form, online form repository, I guess you could say, and just going to use the most recent form without having to download a PDF or a Word document that essentially sits at a point in time. So it's not the most recent or the most valid form that can be used. And the other big challenge is that business processes that are manual and they're disconnected. And essentially it means that a lot of stuff can be happening that the organization has no visibility around. And so if it does mean that it's an expense form process, and then it's going to get to finance and payroll and they're going to have to action something, they don't find out till the last minute. If it's an annual leave request process, they're not finding out till the last minute. If it's an incident, for example, if you work in an industry where construction, for example, where if someone has an incident or they slip on site, if someone has an incident or they slip on site and hurt themselves on a construction site, there's a formal process to go through so the appropriate people get notified. If you don't have a process like this in place, the appropriate people find out at the 11th hour. And so as you can see from some of these challenges, and you're probably thinking about your organization now, and there's maybe a million more you're dealing with, but these are some of the big common challenges that we see in organizations. So moving along, let's look at some of the key considerations when automating and digitizing manual and paper-based processes. And I definitely want to call out that it's not always paper-based. It can be online or digital, but it is still manual in the sense that it's lots of Word documents or PDFs that get emailed around, or they do get printed and scanned, but then they get emailed around. They're very disconnected. There's no structure, there's no tracking, there's no audit trail around them. So let's look at some of those key considerations when you actually want to automate the process and when you want to digitize some of these manual and paper-based processes. So the first point is to look internally and map out the current processes you have right now. So talk to the different users, the different stakeholders, find out how they're actually managing a certain process in the organization. Maybe it's an expense review approval process, maybe it's an incident process, and find out what's working for them, what's not working for them, and all the different steps it goes through, whether it is a physical form, whether it's an email, whether something gets printed out and scanned and then emailed back. Map out that whole process from beginning to end. Find out who the different people are that are involved in it, that might be reviewing different steps or approving different steps. And also, don't necessarily just think about the people who fill it out and who need to review and approve it. Because often a lot of organizations get stuck just in those two stages, which is who's filling this out and who's going to review and approve it. But also think about other people who may not be part of the review and the approval process, but it's really important for them to know about this. So, for example, maybe someone fills out an annual leave form and it gets reviewed and approved by their manager and HR, for example. But you'd also like to let front desk know that that person's going to be on leave. So if anyone does call through for them or come to visit them, they actually know this person's on leave for a period of time. That person at front desk may not be reviewing and approving the leave form, but it's really important for them to know that this is actually happening and this is what's taking place. So when you do map out those current processes, think about the broader picture, not just the person filling it out and the person reviewing and approving it. Think about the other people that might benefit and know what's going on. And then identify who needs to be involved in digitizing the process. So think about who is going to be that champion that's actually going to not just document it, but see it through, of helping set up and configure that online form and workflow process, and then actually teach and train users and think about that change management process of how are we going to tell you not to use that paper form you printed out for the last 5 years or send lots of emails. How are we going to train you on the new process, and how's it going to be a lot better for the end users, for the people that review and approve it, and for those other users that just need to know about something. So it's really important to identify those different people that are not just involved in the process of the form and workflow, so to speak, but also involved in actually making it happen and delivering it to users and training them from a change management perspective. The next area to think about and consider is usability. And this is a big one that I think is really important to focus on, and one of my favorites to talk about and work with organizations on. So the first is think about that overall design and the UX, the user experience of the forms site or the portal. So think about, what is it going to look like when a user jumps in to fill in that online form? What's that journey going to be like? Is it going to be really easy for them? Will fields be pre-populated because they've maybe logged in and authenticated themselves, and we know their first name and their last name, so we don't need them to put that in again. We know their email address, so we don't need them to fill that in either. So think really about that user experience, and then think about what it means for other users in the workflow process that are reviewing and approving, and what that actually looks like for them, what their whole interaction with the site or the portal is, and that whole user experience. Then look at the design and the layout of the form online. So very often organizations will say, here's an email template we've been using and we want to turn this into an online form and workflow process, or they will give you a piece of paper that's printed out, Word document or a PDF, and this has been a form that's been filled out for ages. And they just want to put that online and digitize it. I think it's really important to look at the design and layout of the form online. It's very likely going to be quite different to the piece of paper. And for very good reasons, in terms of how you would actually interact with the form on a mobile device or a tablet or a desktop, for example, is going to be different to a piece of paper or a printed PDF. So think about the design and the layout of the form, what fields you're going to have where, and what's going to make sense for users that are actually trying to fill it out. And coupled with that is then thinking about that mobile and tablet view. So when you're creating that form and drag and drop to set it up, as you'll see in a few moments in the demo, think about what that mobile and tablet view is and what that experience will be like for a person that's filling this out on the go. And the other point is to consider multi-page forms or forms with multiple panels that can dynamically display. So often you see those forms that need to be filled out and there are 2 or 3 or 4 pages of a Word document or a PDF. And when you bring that online and you digitize it, you don't want a really long page that just keeps scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So think about things like multi-page forms or forms where when you select certain options, different panels dynamically display to show that this is additional fields you should fill out based on the previous answer you just gave. So I think it's really important to think about that overall user experience, and also think about the actual form fields and the validation you can do, because it is online. So you can make sure it's an email address. You can make sure it's a phone number and there's no letters in that field. Once the form gets set up and obviously is being submitted, then it's the workflow process. So when you're thinking about the workflows, obviously you would have mapped it from the stage before I've mentioned. But think about what the process is that makes the most sense for your organization. And they can be simple or they can be really complex. It just depends on what your requirements are. Definitely don't oversimplify them and don't make them too complex. It's got to work for the organization. You don't want to miss steps. But definitely don't aim for one or the other. You may have different scenarios or permutations depending on exactly what you're trying to configure and what you're trying to set up. When you do think about the approval process, you may have one or more paths. So you may want to set up something like parallel workflow, for example, where something can go through workflow and it can go through 2 different paths at the same time. You may have multiple approval processes. You may want to think about things of what happens if this gets rejected? How do we go back in the workflow process? And set up scenarios for items that may need to leave workflow early. So what if there's a rule or a permutation or an exception, for example, where if this happens, then this item leaves workflow and it goes to a different workflow, or it automatically gets approved or automatically gets rejected. And the last one to think about is the smart routing. So maybe based on different form fields that get submitted, you might skip the first basket and go straight to the second basket of a workflow process. Having the form set up is fantastic. Having the workflow is great as well, but then it's the notification. So think about that user experience again. When you're managing this and you're planning this at the very beginning, think about your users and think about how do those users actually get notified that there's something there for them to review and something for them to approve. Think about where that's going to be and how they can actually approve that. What do they need to do? Can they do that from their email? Do they log into the portal and review and approve it? And obviously, a lot of these forms and workflows, they exist for a very key reason, which is running reports, and often for management and different executives or team leaders. So definitely think about the reporting for management and what that actually means and how you're going to be able to get that data to the right people. So let's jump into the demo. So I'm going to jump in here to a live demo, which is on a form that I'm going to run through and set up over here. So I've got a page of content sitting over here on a demo site. So hopefully everyone can see my web browser over here. I just want to make sure that everyone is seeing the right screen. Just to confirm that everybody can see my screen, can I get a show of hands just to make sure that everyone's seeing my web browser over there? Just to make sure it's coming through nice and clearly. Brilliant, brilliant. And great to see how responsive and attentive everyone is. That's good as well. Full marks for everybody there. There's all this distance learning going on right now. I figured good to give everyone a pat on the back there. So perfect. So I'm just here on a demo site that I've set up, and this is just an example site I've got, and I'm going to be setting up a form over here, which is my expense request form. So that's just the example that I'm going to run through now. I'm going to simulate. So I've logged into Elcom over here, our forms and workflow solution, and this is just being deployed on a demo site that I'm playing with. And I'm going to add a form element to the page over here. So I just want to very, very quickly jump in and create my own form. And there's a range of different, what we call elements or widgets you can see there. Those are just other capabilities in the Elcom platform, and you would see those depending on security permissions and things like that. So I've jumped in over here to my form designer, and I'm going to give you a demo run through of this. So I'm going to show you quite a lot of different features and functionality of what can be done. So the first thing is, we spoke about the layout of forms, and we know that different forms have different layouts and look and feels. So the first thing I've got over here is where I can choose the number of columns. And so I could look at a 1-column form, a 2-column form, or a 3-column form. We also have the ability where you might set it up a little bit like a newspaper. You know, the irony of giving you this explanation with a newspaper as an example, where you have maybe 1 column and then it breaks into 2 columns and then 3 columns and then 1 column. And so you can have it separated in a whole bunch of different ways. And on the left over here, I've got a whole range of different fields that I can very, very quickly add. So we have the ability to add panels as well. Panels are how you would maybe group a bunch of fields. So we're doing an expense form over here. So let's jump in over here, and I'm actually going to add a panel, and I'm going to call it Your Details. And I'm just going to put my single line over here, and I want your name. Now, we spoke a bit about making sure the right data goes into the right field. So because I'm logged in over here as a user, I could make this mandatory. I could also pre-populate this with the first and last name. So from a data entry perspective, if it is a portal or an intranet or a site where someone has authenticated themselves, very, very easy for you to jump in and set it up so that they don't have to put in their basic details already that you know about them. I'm going to go add an email here as well. Let's just put my email there. And I'm going to make that mandatory, and I'm going to do the exact same thing over there. I'm going to populate that with my email address. Now I'm going to add another panel over here, and we're going to call this type of, we'll just call this expense details. How about that? And we're going to go over here and we're going to give it a name of expense. And again, I can jump in over here and choose how many characters, what the width is of that box. I might jump in over here and put a date in, date of expense. And that one's going to be mandatory. We definitely want to know when that happened. I might want to put in a drop down over here. So maybe we'll do type of expense. And we'll put in a few different types of expenses over there. We might say it's travel. We might call it food as an example over there. We might want to call it hardware. Maybe we'll have another option. So I've got a few different options over there based on this expense. I can then add a range of other fields. So for my example over here, right now I've got a standard field, I've got an email, I've got a date box over there, I've got a type of expense, which is a drop down over here. I might want to add a radio button list in. So I'm going to add a radio button list over here just to order that. And reimbursement required. And that's going to be a yes or a no answer. I might want to add in a description, for example. So I've got a paragraph field over here. More details, please. And to top it all off, I'm going to add 2 more additional fields over here. The one I'm going to add is a file upload. So we'll just say upload document. And at the bottom of that, I'm actually going to add a signature field, because in this form, I want people to jump in and I want them to be able to review and approve that. So really, really easy for you to jump in over there and set up your different fields. I'm going to save those changes. Then when I jump in over here, I can go, there's a whole bunch of other options. Now I'm obviously not going to go through them all, but I can do things like select different button types and select pop-up messages or redirect them to other pages. I can also save it. So halfway through working on this, I might want to save it. I can send email triggers and notifications. I might say on approval, it's going to go to Josh. And this is the expense form notification, is the email I'm going to receive. I can choose to allow attachments. And one of the great features we have is we have the ability to include a PDF of the form as an attachment. So as soon as you submit this form, at that point in time, it turns it into a PDF document. And that then becomes something that gets attached to the form submission. And it gives you that point in time, that record to say when this was submitted, exactly what did it look like at that time? What information did we have? I can also set up things like advanced email routing combinations. So this is, we don't call this workflow. We've got a fully feature-rich workflow module, but you might have basic things. So for example, if this is a travel expense and it has a reimbursement, it goes to Josh. And I can choose the different journey that it may be going on over there. Now, there's a range of other options I can add over here. For example, I can add the spam capture to make sure they're human. And there's a whole range of other permutations. But I'm happy with my form so far. I've got some pretty, great information I'm going to be grabbing over there. And you'll see when I publish my form, it just displays on my demo site. And I just picked up the styling of the demo site that I'm setting this up on. And I can jump in over here and it's pre-populated with my help desk user and my email. The name I can fill in, obviously the date, the type of expense. More details can be added over here. And we've got that built-in signature over there. So I can jump in over here and get someone to type in their name or to draw their signature. And that's a built-in. The great thing about that is it's fully mobile responsive. I can look at it on a mobile or a tablet device. And the nice thing is on a mobile device or a tablet, for example, I could sign that signature, obviously with my finger and scribble that over there. So we set up our expense form over here as an example. And now I want to set up a workflow process. So I go into my workflow over here, my maintain workflows, and this is the admin area of Elcom. So obviously only specific users have permission to access this. And I'm going to jump in over here. And we're going to call this expense approval workflow. I'm going to make that active, and I'm going to say that this workflow applies to forms. Now in Elcom, you can choose how many days per basket something sits there for, and I can choose what it applies to. So I could say it applies to content in certain folders. Alternatively, I could go specifically select the form, and in this example, I'm going to select my expense request form. Oh, and I got a wonderful demo error there. That's a very interesting scenario. You can see it's a nice live demo there. Not too sure why it wanted to give me that error. And I jump in there and actually select the form that it applies to. You've also got the ability of selecting folders. So for example, I've selected and created that in my wind energy folder. So one of the other things you can actually do is you could say, this applies to forms specifically in a folder. So any form that gets created in my wind energy folder as an example now, this workflow actually applies to any of those forms that are created over there. And then I can jump in over here and I can go select who my approvers are, and I'm going to go make myself the workflow manager. And so a workflow manager doesn't mean that they're the ones that actually approve every single step. It means that they're the ones that oversee the whole workflow process. And then I can jump in over here, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but I can easily jump in over here and then go set up different baskets, basket names, and basket owners. I can set rules. So, for example, what happens on approval? Does it go to the next basket or does it go to another workflow? Or on rejection, does it go back to the originator? Does it go to the next basket or a previous basket? Or the person rejecting it can actually determine what happens next. And built in Elcom, as well as having in-system notifications that show you how many items are in your workflow. So for example, my demo user right now has one item in their inbox. You can see it on the top right corner there. Built in Elcom, we also have a whole range of different email notification and triggers. So for example, I might say, well, when this enters this basket, who gets notified? All users in the basket, the original author, the workflow manager, or someone else. So that's that great example we spoke about before with annual leave, where if an annual leave form gets submitted, it might go to the manager or the team leader or to HR, but maybe you want to let front desk know as well. So in that scenario, you might go to here on approval and email someone else and add front desk details over here so that they get a notification as well. So it's very, very easy for you to jump in and point and click to create that workflow process with all the different rules and permutations you might have. And then your form will have the ability to, when it gets submitted, go through that whole review and approval process. And you've got peace of mind knowing that all the responses and results are securely stored. You can receive email notifications with PDF attachments to that as well, if you do have a PDF at the point in time, as well as the fact that the user can receive their own attachments or copies for their record of the form that's been submitted. And you've got the ability to integrate it to other systems as well as export the data into other solutions you may need to export it into. So that's a bit of an overview of Elcom Forms and Workflow in action. So hopefully you've seen some of that and understand, okay, great, this is what we can do, this is how it works and some of the practicalities of it, and obviously how simple, quick and easy it is to actually do that. Before we jump into questions, I did want to wrap it up by looking at this whole idea of where to next and how can you get quick wins to start automating manual processes and increasing efficiency in your organization. And what can you start doing today? So there's quite a few quick wins that we've identified and we think can help. So the first is to map out those processes that you can automate. You're probably going to be thinking about a lot of different processes you'd like to improve and you'd like to automate, and we'd really recommend map out those processes, prioritize them, and work out which are the ones you want to start with. Also look at those forms you want to digitize. Again, you're going to have so many forms, so much paper, so many manual processes. So have a look at the ones that you want to digitize and you possibly want to start with. And the best way to do it is to start with the simple, easy forms so you can actually get those quick wins. That'll also help you demonstrate value to the organization. And it's also going to get your users used to online forms or automated processes. So it's really, really important to think about it from that perspective. Get some quick wins in there. There is definitely different organizations. Some like to start with the most complex form, knowing that after that, everything is always easy. But as you can see, it's really easy point and click and drag and drop in Elcom. Or you want to start with some of the simpler forms just to get them up and running. Then another real quick win is to map out the different approval processes for your workflow. So think about that. Don't make it too simple. Don't make it too complex. Make sure it works for your organization. But it helps if you can actually map it out. And then think about the user experience. So consider things like single sign-on for intranet and portal solutions to help pre-populate those forms and improve that experience. So you saw in the demo, I showed you those examples where we were pre-populating forms, and it was just giving the user a much better user experience because they didn't need to fill in the fields again. And you saw that whole expense form and workflow process that I set up the form from scratch, from nothing, and set up that workflow. It took us just a few minutes. It was less than a few minutes of work to actually set that up. Then look at out-of-the-box forms and workflow and digital workplace internet solutions that will help you get up and running. And I think that's a real big thing. And obviously what the Elcom solution does is it's really easy to use. It's out of the box and it helps you get up and running. So this doesn't become this long developed forms project, but something that you can actually deploy and start helping and benefiting your organization with right away from day one. So we're about to jump into the Q&A and happy to answer questions. We've got a bit of time for questions. So there's some great questions coming through. Keep typing those there. For those that aren't familiar, I thought I'd give you a very quick introduction to Elcom and who we are. We're your digital workplace platform, and we're a solution that's used for a whole range of different organizations in different ways. We can partner with you to power your digital workplaces and intranets, your websites, your marketing and personalization, your portals, your collaboration and social, your learning management, and your mobile solutions. And it's all on the same platform. And forms and workflow can often be deployed as their own forms and workflow portals, or they're part of digital workplaces and intranets and websites. We're a mobile-friendly platform. It's all mobile responsive. It's very, very secure and scalable and very, very easy to use. And I think one of the big things about the platform is there's a lot of modules and functionality and capability. So it's about building that partnership with you and helping you solve that challenge right now for forms and workflow, but also look at what are some of the other things you're trying to automate or digitize, or what is that employee experience or user experience you're trying to improve, and how can we partner with you and how can we assist you to do that. So that's a little bit about Elcom, and more than happy to discuss your specific requirements or use cases as appropriate. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. I really hope you found it useful, and it's going to help you with your journey of digitizing manual processes and delivering much better forms and workflow solutions that are standalone or part of your digital workplace and intranet. Here are my contact details. Feel free to get in touch. I'm going to jump in, and there's quite a few questions, so I'm going to answer as many of them as possible. So there's a good question there. Where is the data stored? So that's a great question. So it depends on how you're deploying the solution. So by default, we'll store the data around the platform, securely store the data around the platform and inside Elcom, and you can run reports and export those into things like Excel or CSV, as well as get email notifications with the responses that have been submitted. But it is all all securely stored there. And the great thing as well is, in terms of delivery, it's all, we're just for those local. When I say local, I mean, Australia, New Zealand. It's all stored on Australian soil, so it's not overseas. Servers data doesn't live anywhere else. Data is all stored locally. If you have your own data policies or requirements or restrictions or governance, or you have your own servers you want to store it on and host it locally, for example, that's not a problem as well. We've definitely got the ability to enable you to host it locally or in your own preferred hosting environment so that you store the data there. The other thing is there is a really powerful APIs on the platform. So data could be submitted, and then that data can go through to, another system, maybe a CRM, an ERP, a payroll, an accounting solution, or whatever it might be. But yeah, all data stored securely, and if you go with that cloud-hosted offering, securely stored in Australia. Another question, can forms be applied to any type of site, a staff intranet or a website? Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, definitely. Forms can be deployed anywhere, really. So, it could be as part of an intranet or digital workplace, it could be part of a website, or it could be its own forms portal, which is often very, very common. No, okay, there's quite a few questions. Keep asking all the questions, and then we'll get back to them. If we don't get through all of them, we'll get back to them all afterwards, so feel free to ask as many questions. Sorry, another question, can you customize the email notifications that users receive? Yeah, that's a good question. So you definitely can. That can be customized in terms of the content and the text in that they receive, but also in terms of the look and feel and the design. So yeah, you can definitely customize those. A few other questions I'll quickly answer. One is, are the forms mobile friendly? Yeah, they definitely are. So as we spoke about before, mobile and tablet view and experience is really important. So the forms are completely mobile friendly and tablet friendly as well. I think that's really important. We know a lot of people are often implementing solutions and if they're expecting their users to access them on the go. So 100%. We'll take two more quick ones. How long does it take to set up and create the forms? So that's a good question. Obviously, it depends on what the form is or the process is that you're trying to set up and create and automate. So that's obviously, an important asterisk or point around that. But as you saw now in the example we did and the demo we did right now, that was a very quick basic form, but it took us, a minute or two. So it was very, very quick and easy to set that up there. So that's the nice thing is you can set it up really, really easily, but you can also adapt it and change it really easily down the line depending on what the requirements might be. Last question over here. What happens if you want to change the workflow process of the form? That's a really good question, interesting question, because yeah, your processes often will change over time. And so again, it's really easy. It's point and click, drag and drop. You can jump in and change the form fields and data you capture. You could change the way the workflow goes and the journey that the workflow goes on as well. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility with doing that down the line. So you don't have to set it once and that's what it is. It's definitely about being dynamic and fluid and making it really easy for you. So that pretty much wraps up everything today. There are a lot of other questions which we will respond to individually. So thank you very much, everyone, for a lot of the questions, the enthusiasm, for everyone's attendance today and interest. And especially in these times, really hope we can help partner with you and help you digitize these processes, help your teams communicate a lot more effectively and efficiently, especially if they're working remotely. So please feel free to get in touch with us. My contact details are there. And the team at Elcom, we'd love to partner with you and support you. So thank you very much, everyone, and keep in touch with us. And we look forward to working with you soon. Have a great day. Thank you very much.